Number 1.
Abbrederis was last seen in Dallas, Texas on April 2, 1996. She left behind her vehicle, clothes, luggage, car keys and other personal belongings, and left her dog unattended inside her apartment. There was laundry left in the washing machine and piled on Abbrederis's bed, which is uncharacteristic of her. Red fingerprints near the front door turned out to be paint rather than blood. Abbrederis has never been heard from again. Abbrederis's boyfriend withdrew money from her savings account, signed over one of her cars to himself, and emptied their joint checking account after her disappearance. He told police he jointly owned all he took. Investigators do not believe his actions necessarily make him a suspect in her case. At the time of her disappearance, Abbrederis was an exotic dancer in various Dallas clubs. She has one prior conviction for prostitution. Authorities stated that due to her lifestyle, they were uncertain at first as to whether she had come to harm or simply left of her own accord. Abbrederis previously served in the army, where she met her husband. They married in 1990 and divorced in 1995. She was very close to one of her sisters and her mother, both of whom live in Michigan, but at the time of her disappearance she was estranged from her father. He lives in Hong Kong. Abbrederis's case remains unsolved and foul play is suspected. Angela Abbrederis may go by several other names to include Angela Kim Marie Abbrederis, Angelica Mariang, Mei Ling, Audra Abbrederis, Vanessa Abbrederis, or Nigella Mariang. Angela Abbrederis was 28 years old at the time she went missing in 1996. Angela Abbrederis is 5 feet 7 inches to 5 feet 9 inches tall and weighed approximately 115 to 130 pounds at the time she went missing. Angela Abbrederis has brown hair and brown eyes. She also has a scar on her hip and a tattoo of a butterfly on her right hip. If you have any information about the whereabouts of Angela Abbrederis, contact the Texas Department of Public Safety Missing Persons Clearinghouse at 1-800-346-3243 or the Dallas Police Department at 214-671-4316.
Number 2.
Melissa was last seen in El Paso, Texas on March 7, 1987. She went out to play video games at a convenience store off Rushing and never returned to her residence in the 10,400 block of Orpheus in the northeast part of the city. She has never been heard from again. 2 weeks earlier, Melissa had run away from home after a family argument. She returned after only 2 days, however, and authorities don't believe she left of her own accord again when she went missing in March 1987. That same year, several other females disappeared from El Paso, and most of them were later found murdered and buried in the desert. The victims were all small, slender young women in their teens and early 20s. Melissa and 2 other girls, Marjorie Knox and Cheryl Vasquez, are still missing. Melissa knew at least one of the murder victims. They attended H.E. Charles Junior High School together. That victim also knew Marjorie. Vasquez had also formerly attended H.E. Charles Junior High School. David Leonard Wood, a serial rapist who was paroled in January 1987, was later convicted of murdering 6 of the El Paso victims, though he maintains his innocence to this day. He was sentenced to death in 1993, but his sentence remains under appeal, as his lawyers allege he is mentally retarded. The murders of El Paso girls and women stopped after Wood's October 1987 arrest for rape. He has not been charged in connection with Melissa's case, and it's unclear whether he was involved. A photo of Wood is posted with this case summary. Melissa's disappearance remains unsolved.
Number 3.
Allen lived in a second-floor apartment at Fountain Plaza on the west side of the city, where she was also an assistant manager there managed 3 other apartment complexes. Elizabeth lived at the Fountain Plaza Apartments, a complex she also helped manage. Her husband, Max, had died in 1978. Between 10:30 and 11 a.m., Elizabeth spoke with her sister on the telephone. It's possible that she also had breakfast with a man that she'd accompanied to an event a few days prior. Her vehicle was found abandoned in San Bernardino, California 4 days later. From receipts found in the car, it was discovered that her late husband's credit card was used to purchase gas in Tucumcari, Albuquerque and Grants, New Mexico and in northern Arizona, and Max's signature had been forged. Elizabeth had 4 sons, only one of which is still living. Her family did not believe that she left of her own volition and have always suspected that foul play was involved. Investigators found no signs of a struggle at her apartment, which was on the 2nd floor. I do not see any indication that the man who possibly had breakfast with her was ever identified, but unless he was younger than Elizabeth, he is likely deceased. Elizabeth would be 94 years old now if still living. It's also not clear whether Elizabeth told her sister she had already finished breakfast and was alone during their phone call, or if she intended to meet him after their conversation. I tend to lean toward the latter, since it doesn't seem to be known whether this meeting actually took place. Serial killer Henry Lee Lucas confessed to abducting Elizabeth, but there is no evidence that he was involved. Lucas is known for confessing to many crimes he could not have committed, and this confession does not appear to have been taken seriously. Lucas died in prison in 2001. The state of California website states that she was last seen crossing the Mexican border, but I've not seen this account anywhere else. The route that the gas receipts indicate the car took is odd. El Paso, Texas sits on Highway 10, and both the Mexican border and Las Cruces, New Mexico are mere minutes away. Highway 10 westbound from El Paso goes into Las Cruces and eventually leads to San Bernardino, where the car was found. However, Tucumcari is a small town that is nowhere near Highway 10. Google shows that with today's speeds and roads, it's about a 5-hour drive out of the way from Las Cruces to Tucumcari. I can't help but think that whoever took her car had a connection to the Tucumcari area, since there would be no logical reason to take that route to San Bernardino. With the vehicle abandoned in California, it would seem that he either stayed there or had access to other transportation. So it leads me to wonder if this was someone with ties to both locales. With so many things available to search online now, I really wish the identity of her possible breakfast companion was known, so we could see if he had any such ties or a criminal past. Since the car was found just 4 days after she vanished, it would have been in a reasonable time frame for gas station attendants to remember who purchased gas. I wonder if any of them were able to provide a description. I've also seen no indication of whether any fingerprints were found in the vehicle. In spite of the fact that Elizabeth would likely be deceased by now due to her age, she was robbed of her golden years, and her children were robbed of their mother. It would be great if her surviving sister and son could learn what happened.
Number 4.
Appleton was last seen by her mother at approximately 5 p.m. on October 13, 1999 in the vicinity of the 100 block of Northeast 9th Avenue in Northwest Amarillo, Texas. Appleton's mother said her daughter appeared to be frightened about something, but refused to say what was disturbing her or to accompany her mother back to their family's residence in Pampa, Texas. Appleton has never been heard from again. Her relatives reported her missing from their home in Pampa in November 1999. Appleton was last known to be in the company of Ivory Teeler, also known as T&or T-Baby. When he was interviewed by investigators, Teeler stated that he did not know Appleton's whereabouts. He has since refused to speak any further to the police about her disappearance. Appleton left behind her son and daughter, which her loved ones said is extremely uncharacteristic of her. She had been divorced from her husband for about a year prior to her disappearance, and her children lived with her mother. She saw them regularly prior to going missing, but has not had contact with them since she vanished. She has also not picked up her child support checks from her ex-husband. He stopped paying support less than a year after Appleton disappeared. Appleton's mother received a phone call from an unidentified man on August 20, 2000. The individual claimed that he was a gang member and witnessed Appleton's alleged murder at a hog farm in Amarillo, Texas shortly after her disappearance. He said that another member killed Appleton, then disposed of her remains at the farm. The individual claimed that her body would never be located. The man terminated the call before Appleton's mother could learn additional details. The information he provided has never been confirmed, and no supporting evidence has been located. Appleton's brother, a law enforcement officer in the Pampa area, told reporters that he learned his sister may have been involved with gang members, prostitution and the drug culture in 1999. Appleton frequently visited the Amarillo area at the time. Her brother stated that it would be uncharacteristic of Appleton to leave her children without warning. She may have traveled to El Paso, Texas, Houston, Texas, or Baltimore, Maryland after her disappearance. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 5.
Arredondo was last seen in her home in Houston, Texas on February 11, 2012. That day, she and her live-in boyfriend got into an argument. He disabled her car so she couldn't leave the house, then left. Arredondo and her teenage daughter then left the house on foot and went out to shop and get a meal. While she was out, Arredondo sent her boyfriend a text message saying she was leaving him. They returned home and, at some point, Arredondo and her daughter saw her boyfriend go to a friend's house across the street. They didn't try to talk to him. Arredondo went to sleep on the sofa in her daughter's bedroom. She was last seen at 10:30 p.m. When her daughter woke up at 7 a.m., her mother was gone. She asked Arredondo's boyfriend where she was, and he said he hadn't gotten home until 5 a.m. and he hadn't seen her. She left behind her purse, money, wallet, clothes, identification, ATM card, and makeup. Only her keys, cellular phone, cigarettes, her engagement ring and a matching necklace were missing. Arredondo has never been heard from again. Arredondo lived in the cities of Albuquerque and Clovis in New Mexico for most of her life before she moved to Texas in November 2011. Although there's no hard evidence of foul play in her case, her family stated it's uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning, and they don't believe she would have abandoned her 3 teenage children. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 6.
Arthur's disappeared with her boyfriend, Chad Peters. They lived in Corpus Christi, Texas, and Peters had a union job as an electrical lineman. He had moved to the area from Ohio a few months earlier. In early November 2018, Arthur told loved ones through text messages that she and Peters were in Laredo, Mexico for his work. Arthur reported the couple's vehicle, a silver metallic 4-door 2018 Honda Civic Del Sol with the Texas license plate number KWB0872, had been stolen with their identification inside it, and she planned to go back to Texas. However, without identification it would be difficult or impossible for either she or Peters to travel legally across the border back to the United States. The vehicle theft has not been confirmed, and a photo of it is posted with this case summary. The FBI reported that the couple was seen crossing back and forth from Texas into Mexico, the last crossing being into Mexico on November 7, and appeared to be moving to Mexico because in the video of their crossing, the car was full of their belongings. However, when Tammy called her children's stepmother on November 9, she said she was in Bruni, Texas. The November 9 call was the last time anyone heard from either her or Peters. The circumstances of the couple's disappearances are unclear, and their families stated it made no sense for them to go missing. They are afraid for their safety.
Number 7.
Laura resided in an apartment complex in the 7930 block of Cerrita Street in Houston, Texas. She asked her mother for money to purchase a newspaper for a school assignment during the evening hours of March 10, 2002. Laura departed from her home at approximately 10:15 p.m. and walked to the Broadway convenience store, which is less than 100 feet behind her residence. The store is housed inside the Conoco gas station in the 2600 block of Broadway Street. An employee told authorities that Laura arrived at the store alone and bought a newspaper, then left shortly afterwards. She has never been heard from again. Laura's mother became concerned when her daughter failed to return home and walked to the store herself. She reported Laura as a missing child shortly thereafter. Laura's shoes and her newspaper were discovered scattered inside a parking lot between her apartment complex and the gas station later that evening. An extensive search of the area produced no clues as to her whereabouts. Witnesses reported observing a full-size, mid-1980s red-maroon cargo van near the store around the time of Laura's disappearance. The vehicle was two-tone and had a large-sized white or light-colored stripe painted along its center and had a gray-colored bumper. The sliding door on the right side of the van had a window. Witnesses said that the window behind the door may have been missing and plywood concealed its opening. It was apparently a work-related vehicle and appeared to be faded and in worn condition. Additional reports stated that the van had rear windows but may have been missing its side windows. A photo of a similar vehicle is posted with this case summary. A resident near Broadway Street reported seeing the van at approximately 10 p.m. on the night of Laura's disappearance. The witness did not contact law enforcement officials until April 2002, 1 month after Laura vanished. He stated that at the time he had not realized the significance of what he saw. He said the van's sliding door was open and reported observing an unidentified Hispanic or Caucasian male near the scene. The vehicle was parked in the same lot where Laura's shoes and newspaper were discovered. In February 2003, Laura's disappearance was linked to 3 men: Walter Alexander Sordo, Edgardo Rafael Cubas, and Eduardo Navarro. Photographs of Sordo and Cubas are posted with this case summary. Sordo is from El Salvador and Cubas is from Honduras. They went on a crime spree of robberies, rapes and murders in the predominantly Hispanic east side of Houston. Navarro was charged with driving the getaway car. He was not directly involved in the murders. Blood found in a SUV belonging to Cubas' father was linked to Laura's DNA. Cubas admitted that he, Sordo, and Navarro occasionally borrowed the vehicle. Semen matching one of the suspects was also located in the car. Cubas and Sordo were charged with capital murder in the deaths of 2 adult waitresses and a 15-year-old girl. Navarro was charged in the same offenses but could not face the death penalty because he was only 15 years old at the time of the crimes. Sordo and Cubas were ultimately convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. Both are awaiting execution. Navarro pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of aggravated robbery and was sentenced to 13 years in prison. None of the suspects were charged in Laura's case due to lack of evidence. Laura's favorite color is maroon and her favorite number is 1. She is described as having a shy, reserved nature and is very organized. She enjoys journal keeping and records her activities. Foul play is suspected in Laura's disappearance, but no charges have been filed in her case.
Number 8.
Mark was last seen surfing on his bright yellow surfboard at Bryan Beach, Texas, near where the Brazos River empties into the Gulf of Mexico, on September 22, 1974. He is from Houston, Texas, and he and some other Houston teenagers were camping in the area. Mark and another boy, David Hesterly, went surfing at 6 a.m. with their surfboards tethered to their ankles. When they had not arrived back to shore by 11 p.m., the beach patrol was notified and a search began. In spite of an extensive search lasting several days, neither of the surfers or their boards were located. They are assumed to be lost at sea. Mark's surfboard had a white top and a bright yellow bottom, with the word sunshine written on the deck and an Indian on a horse on the belly. There was red fin with gold trim on the skeg, the fin at the bottom center of the board. David's surfboard was pale yellow in color with an unclear design. It was older and battered, with one ding on the deck filled with purple wax, duct tape on the side of the board at the front and back, and 2 black fins. Like Mark, David was 17 years old at the time of his disappearance. Photos and additional information for him are unavailable.
Number 9.
Ava was last seen in San Antonio, Texas on September 17, 2015. She may be in the company of her non-custodial mother, Catherine Ann Baldwin, who has a felony warrant out for her for interfering with child custody. Photos of Catherine are posted with this case summary. Her date of birth is January 3, 1975. She was 40 years old in 2015. She's described as Caucasian, 5'2" and 105 to 120 pounds, with blonde hair and hazel eyes. She is right-handed and has a large tattoo of a rose on her abdomen and hip area. Her natural hair color is light brown. Her nickname is Katie and she may use the last name Moore. Catherine has a history of alcohol and prescription drug abuse, suffers from mental illness, and is supposed to take medication, but there's been no record of her refilling her prescriptions since 2015. She and Ava may move frequently and may be staying in women's shelters and/or homeless shelters. Catherine may tell people she is being stalked. Ava's mother and father, David Hopper, had joint custody of her. After Hopper requested full custody, Catherine disappeared with her. Catherine's vehicle, a silver 2014 Ford Escape with the Illinois license plate number Q29-2793, was found abandoned in a parking lot on Whitby Road in San Antonio in April 2016, 7 months after the pair disappeared. Catherine's family stated they haven't seen or heard from her or Ava since 2015 and they believe they are dead, but Hopper thinks they are alive and in hiding, possibly being helped by friends or family. Catherine has family in Texas, Oklahoma, California, Florida, and Illinois, and friends in several parts of the country as well. Ava's disappearance remains unsolved. She was involved in cheerleading, soccer, gymnastics, and tumbling prior to her disappearance.
Number 10.
Barrientos was last seen in Sugar Land, Texas on June 6, 1994. She worked as a nanny and was last seen at 5 p.m. when she left her job to go home. She has never been heard from again. The next day, when Barrientos didn't show up for work, her employer called her house to ask where she was. Her boss spoke to her son-in-law, Franco's 8 Trejos, who said Barrientos had left because she was angry with him about his not mowing the lawn. Frank and his wife, Brenda Vanessa Trejos, Barrientos' daughter, lived with Barrientos in 1994, and Brenda was 7 months pregnant when her mother disappeared. A photo of Brenda is posted below this case summary. She and her husband reported Barrientos as a missing person on June 11, 5 days after she was last seen. Other than filing the police report, they made no effort to find her, although some of Barrientos' friends posted flyers in the neighborhood. She left all her money behind and her bank account untouched, and she left behind her bicycle, which she used frequently, and her Bible, which she carried everywhere. On June 29, the police searched Barrientos' home for evidence in her case. Frank and Brenda lived with her. Investigators found possible bloodstains on a towel in the residence and 4 adult-sized bloody footprints in the hallway. The towel was sent in for analysis, and testing determined the stains on it were not blood. Barrientos' vehicle was discovered in Houston, Texas on June 30, the day after the house search, and 24 days after she vanished. It was unlocked, and the keys were in the ignition. There was no sign of her at the scene, but her purse, wallet, and keys were discovered inside the car, and there was blood on the back floor mats. When interviewed about his mother-in-law's disappearance, Frank told police he had last seen her asleep at home between 9:30 and 10:30 p.m. on June 6. He and his wife had left the house at that point, and when they returned, the front door was ajar, and Barrientos and her car were gone. He said Barrientos had recently mopped the kitchen floor, but the kitchen floor was being retiled at the time of her disappearance and was only bare concrete. Every place he said she had mopped later tested positive for blood. Brenda and Jose were suspects in Barrientos' disappearance for years, but investigators lacked the evidence to charge either of them in her case. In 2001, after being interviewed again about Barrientos, Frank confessed to her murder. He stated he beat and choked her to death during an argument. He and Brenda put her body in the bathtub and cut her wrists to make her death look like a suicide, but the cuts didn't bleed, so they decided to get rid of her body. Brenda later confessed, not only to helping dispose of her body, but to actively assisting her husband in Barrientos' murder. They decided to kill her, she said, after Barrientos asked them to move out of her home because they were both unemployed and weren't helping with either the household chores or the bills. Brenda and Jose said they'd buried Barrientos in a field near Fulshear, Texas, in North Fort Bend County. Frank led authorities to the burial site, but they could not find her remains as there had been fires in the area, trees had been removed, the ground had been plowed over and leveled with 18 inches of soil added. Cadaver-sniffing dogs, however, did indicate the presence of human remains in the field. It's possible for them to smell a decomposing body, even if it is no longer there. Prosecutors, even with the confessions, had to spend a year gathering enough evidence to prove Barrientos was in fact dead. Brenda and Jose were charged in January 2003 and were tried separately. At her trial, Brenda claimed she assisted her husband in covering up Barrientos' murder, but did not contribute to her mother's death herself. She was convicted of murder and sentenced to 80 years in prison in February 2005. Frank was convicted in May 2005 and sentenced to 45 years in prison. Although her remains have never been found, foul play is suspected in Barrientos' case due to the circumstances involved.